Support provided by the Fred B. and Ruth B. Ziegler Foundation and the Ziegler Art Museum. Located in Jennings City Hall, the museum focuses on emerging Louisiana artists and is a historical and cultural center for Southwest Louisiana. Additional support provided by the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting and viewers like you.
This operation is massive. It is the largest operation that we've responded to since Superstorm Sandy, and it's just devastating out here.
There's rescue work still going on. There's, assessments. We're in for the long haul.
And he's been wanting to come home. He doesn't have a home to come to. Breathe.
Hi everybody, I'm Andre Morrow. On this edition of The State We're In, we are focusing on the 2016 August floods. They produced massive destruction, lives ruined, and questions about who was really to blame. During the next 30 minutes, we're going to take you back 1 year through the eyes of one Denham Springs family who was forced to flee from the high water. We'll find out how they're doing now. We'll also take a look at the impact of the floods on schools and hear how state and national recovery help has gone. That's coming up in 2 minutes, but first, let's look at the week's headlines. It's a precautionary measure, but Governor John Bel Edwards has declared a state of emergency for New Orleans after downpours last weekend left much of the city flooded. In the wake of the deluge came discovery that 16 drainage pumps failed. It has left the Big Easy uneasy with the revelation of concern about the city's drainage system. Mayor Mitch Landrieu has called for the firings of certain sewerage and water board leaders. The governor's office is taking its message about the state's impending fiscal doom directly to people and businesses instead of lobbyists and lawmakers, urging the people of the state to make a decision about the Louisiana they want. So-called temporary taxes are set to expire next year, and with that, the state will find itself staring at a $1 billion budget deficit. The governor addressed major business executives this week, while Commissioner of Administration Jay Darden talked to the Baton Rouge Rotary Club.
We have to have a reality check between now and the next legislative session as to what we want our state to look like. And if we want to get off of the bottom of all those lists that we're on and get more to the top of some other lists, we've got to wake up and make some difficult decisions and decide what are the priorities of the state and how much money do we need to make them happen.
U.S. Representative Garrett Graves was the keynote speaker at the Press Club of Baton Rouge this week, with the flood of 2016 one of his main talking points.
A lot of progress has been made over the last 1 year in that nearly $5 billion in federal funds have been provided through various programs. As you all know, we still have people that are living in gutted homes, that are living in tents, that are living in trailers and other conditions that are less than satisfactory, and certainly not anything that's comparable to pre-flood conditions.
Look for a memoir soon from former Governor Buddy Roemer. It will in part detail growing up on his family's massive cotton plantation in the 1950s. Roemer will begin a book tour in September, giving speeches statewide in Shreveport, Lake Charles, Lafayette, New Orleans, and Baton Rouge, plus Houston and Jackson, Mississippi. He said he's feeling good now after recent health problems. The former governor has recovered after suffering a stroke. Former LSU football coach Les Miles could be in the broadcast booth of Tiger games this fall. The colorful and quirky Miles plans to work with the SEC network as a studio analyst, but could be assigned to press box coverage. Says Miles, "I'm going to be in the media and in a number of different places, and I'm going to have a blast." By this time, a year ago today, rain had begun falling throughout Metro Baton Rouge. Forecasters were concerned about the unusual weather system that seemed to park itself over us. They likened it to an inland tropical depression. Well, the end result, we know, of course. Homes, businesses, lives left in ruin. Many thousands of families were driven from their homes, forced to evacuate. Lori and Jack Vaughn, now of Baton Rouge, were gracious enough to relive what happened to them. Here's their story.
But once again, the unprecedented flood catastrophe in Louisiana leads off our newscast.
Unprecedented became an adjective used over and over in 2016. Across America, non-stop blasts of rain became mega flood events.
Summer 2016. Not one, not two, but 3 1,000-year events.
Louisiana was hit twice. The northern part of the state got it in the spring. Then in August, much of Metro Baton Rouge became a submerged ground zero.
An astonishing 7 trillion gallons of water fell, 3 times more rain than Hurricane Katrina in 2005.
Lori and Jack Vaughn and their 2 children became one of thousands of Louisiana families who found themselves watching something that had never happened before.
We knew it was forecast to be a lot of rain at one time, you know, but just kind of watch it rain and see what's going to happen. And
had you ever come into any situation like this that maybe it helped you be ready for it?
There's no preparation for something you can't stop, something you can't fight. I'll never forget when we walked out of the house, and Lori was saying, "I can't believe we're leaving." And I said, "Well, I can't fight this. I can't stop it." When you can't ensure the safety of your family as a provider, it's pretty crippling.
Jack described it as like being in a movie or a bad dream that you couldn't stop. A progression of events began happening that they couldn't believe and that they had no control over. All they could do was react and wade through it. When did you realize this was not a typical summer rainstorm that just seemed a little longer than usual?
it was probably Friday after, lunchtime when you're like, is it going to stop? This has been a lot of rain, and a lot of rain in a short amount of time. This is about 1 o'clock on Saturday, and we at that point say, okay, it's time to start making plans for what are we going to do.
I took a mop handle and marked our yard where the water line was, and just kind of get a gauge of how fast it was moving towards the house.
That mop stick fell over 3 times within an hour. Like, it was just getting knocked over and toppled over, and the water was rising a foot like every 20 minutes.
And I said, we're going to be in a bind here. Of course, there's no getting out in the car at that point in time, so this is going to be tough.
At this point, we start seeing lots of helicopters, circling around, and that's never a good thing, right? If you're seeing helicopters.
And had this ever happened?
Never, never, never. I mean, our house, we built that house. It's set way above the floodplain. As a matter of fact, we were the highest house on the street.
So that's when we started putting the kids in life jackets. I'm getting ready to take them out in paddleboard, and a friend of mine happened to be coming around with a P-row, and says that he would take them.
We put them in the boat, and we told them that we didn't know when we would see them again, and we didn't know where we would meet them again, but at some point we would see them on higher ground.
So how was that when you're putting your children in a boat so they can move on to safety, but you're staying behind?
I told you I didn't want to cry, but yeah, that's that will go down as the toughest thing that we've ever done.
Soon, Lori and Jack had to get out. They tried to protect some of their belongings, stacking things inside the house that would eventually be filled with 2 feet of water.
Anything that had to be saved, we threw it on top of the counters. And with that, we went into the garage where we have 2 paddle boards hanging on the walls. We took one of them down, literally, threw it in the water. I sat on top of it, we threw the dog on top of it, and Jack began to pull us. The waters are full of fire ants, and we started making this trek to higher ground, which was about 2 miles to the front of the neighborhood to get to higher ground. And that 2-mile trip took us about 3 hours.
We get to the kids, and then you, like I said, you're just, you really spent the next couple of days thinking, did this really happen?
This is a long, slow, big disaster, Louise.
This long, slow, big disaster had weather experts scrambling to draw comparisons. Jack and Lori stayed with friends for several days before eventually returning to their ruined house, one of about 146,000 homes that were the casualties of water sloshing inside, then receding, leaving mud and slime and confusion.
Fortunately, Lori's brother, my brother-in-law, who was glorious, came and got us. We evacuated to his house. I called my father-in-law, and at this point in time I needed help thinking. They're just, I don't know. Mine was completely overwhelmed. So I needed him to come in and help just point in a direction. Because I don't know, it's so much. Where do we start? What do you do?
The Rainmaker produced shocking totals measured in feet, not inches. 2.5 feet in Watson, more than 2 feet in Livingston. Baton Rouge, 1.5 feet, 19 inches. 13 people died. 30,000 were rescued or evacuated. 75% of the homes in Livingston Parish were considered total losses.
This operation is massive. It is the largest operation that we've responded to since Superstorm Sandy, and it's just devastating out here.
In this room, they're working on the strategies and the tactics to get assistance out to people that are in shelters or folks that are trying to clean up their homes after the devastating event. So they're making assignments for people to go out into the neighborhoods, conduct mobile feeding, distribution of relief supplies, getting health services and mental health services on the ground, and information for people.
The BBC used this approach in its world news coverage to drive home the point of the destruction. Before and after aerial photos showing only the location. There was no need for a reporter to describe what was being seen. It took most of the last year for the Vaughns to finally settle into their new home because their financial standing was frankly better than many people. FEMA, for example, didn't give them the full amount of basic recovery money that many others got. They eventually gutted, restored, and sold their home in Denham Springs, and they built a new home in Baton Rouge. They moved into that home a month ago. Through all the heartache, though, they still say blessings from so many people kept them going when they were frustrated and did not know where to turn. Those are stories that we have heard a lot of. And right now I want to welcome to the set Mark Harold, Livingston Parish Homeland Security, and Pat Forbes, Executive Director of the State of Louisiana Disaster Recovery Unit. There are success stories and there are disaster stories. Mark, why don't we begin with you? Where do we sit a year after this flood?
I'm going to say that most of the folks in Livingston Parish are still devastated. They're going through the same thing the family you just talked about. Unfortunately, a lot of them may not have been in the financial situation they were in, so they're still struggling. They're still living in FEMA trailers. They're still living in campers, trying to move forward. They're still trying to decide whether they're in a situation where they have to elevate their home before they can rebuild. It's a nightmare.
So I mean, this is a year later. So
It's
they're
a year later.
still dealing with that.
Absolutely. Now we did get an allocation for mitigation a few weeks back, and we're looking at putting 15 to 20 million in our elevation program. Hopefully we can get some folks elevated and let them start back their rebuild and maybe get back to a little bit of normalcy.
Pat, what about you?
Well, we have seen a lot of both sides that you're describing. We've talked to, as we're going through our program of the Restore Louisiana homeowners program, we're finding a lot of people have at least started rebuilding. But Mark is right. There are still lots and lots of folks out there who are devastated. And even the folks who have been able to get back and get rebuilt. To your point of the story of the family earlier, we've had an enormous amount of people's wealth pulled out of this community for people to go back. I mean, it's a wonderful testament to the resilience of the folks who have just gone, pulled up their bootstraps and gotten to work and gotten their homes partially or fully rebuilt, but that has pulled money out of people's savings, out of credit cards, out of retirement accounts, and that's going to be a long time getting replenished.
What do you look at this point as you review situations? Because these kind of things are going to happen again, and probably not 500 years from now. So what do you look at to make things better?
We're going to take advantage of the hazard mitigation funding and start some drainage projects. You know, everyone has pointed fingers at the interstate. I'm saying let's do some repair work or some improvements to stop the water from ever getting that high again. And we've reached out to DOTD and they seem to be on board with it. So we have that.
But what kind of time frame are we talking about? Because it seems to me that that's something you would act upon immediately.
It sounds simple, doesn't it? But with the hazard mitigation funding, there's so many procedures, so much red tape to go through. It may take us a year to get a project approved and all of the studies done, engineering done, before we can even start the work.
I mean, you look what happened in New Orleans this past weekend, for example. This was a rainstorm. This wasn't even close to what happened here,
Right.
and it certainly wasn't a hurricane.
Right.
That's correct.
Yeah, I would say relative to mitigating future damage, the governor has been very clear from the beginning that he wanted us to take a different approach to how we try to manage the risks associated with flooding. And what he's been talking about from the beginning is looking at watersheds. We tend to work within jurisdictional boundaries because that's how money is, that's how taxes are set up and all that. That's where the money is. That's where the governance is. But we are working now with FEMA through a pilot program to start a process of looking at 3 different watersheds around the state that comprise several parishes and several drainage districts and towns and all those things, so that we can start having an approach that's more holistic and that neighbors actually understand what the effects of what they do are going to do to their neighbors and that sort of thing, so that they can make the best, smartest decisions about investments in improving drainage and decreasing the risk of flood for the whole watershed instead of for a jurisdiction, because the water obviously doesn't know the jurisdictional boundaries.
It doesn't discriminate whatsoever.
Let me add to that a little bit. Pat and I have spoke, Casey Tingle with GOSEP on the mitigation stuff, and hopefully we'll have a meeting next week with Ascension and EBR and Livingston to look at several projects, combine our hazard mitigation funding, and do some regional projects. And I think it's going to be one of the first in the state that we're going to do. So I'm happy to say that we have 2 partners, 2 neighboring parishes that's willing to come to the table.
And that is what will make some things work, especially when people come together.
It's the only thing that's going to make it work.
That's exactly the process for looking at watersheds, is to get those not only those parishes, but the towns, the Amite River Basin Commission, all those entities that have a part in the water management there, working together. And he's right, that'll be one of the first. Acadiana parishes in the Vermilion River Basin have jumped out and agreed to work together, and again, like Mark is talking about, pool their hazard mitigation fund so that they can do the smartest projects for the whole basin.
Guys, thank you so much for coming here and talking about this tough subject, but it needs to be talked about, and things need to happen to make it better for the future.
We're working at it.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. There is one program that certainly has done pretty well, especially lately, and there's still many people who qualify for the Restore program. If you have not filled out that survey, we reminded you before, please fill it out, look into it, and just simply go to restore.la.gov to get that information there. You know, people from Louisiana really know how to help one another. Take the Cajun Navy, for example. They rescued people and at the same time restored faith in humanity. And what about the celebrities who stepped up, like Britney Spears and Ellen DeGeneres? Both are from Louisiana originally. On the Ellen Show, check out what she did with one of the schools that was torn apart by the floods.
As we all saw, Britney just donated $125,000 to be able to buy that car for y'all, and I wanted to match that. Our friends at Shutterfly want to give you $125,000 for your middle school. Thank you so much. Oh my God.
So there's Ellen right there with the people from Galvez Middle School hit so hard, giving them money there. She also worked with Walmart, and that collaboration raised $1.5 million for various Louisiana flood relief efforts. Of course, the high water, as we know, it did not discriminate. More than 30 schools in the capital region were affected during this event. LPB's Kelly Spires is here now with more on that story. Kelly?
That's right, Andre. This week marked the beginning of classes for most public schools across the state. We checked in with the principal from Ascension Parish, Galvez Middle School. We spoke to the state superintendent, John White, about recovery, last year's academic success, and what's on the table for schools around the state this year. Galvez Middle School students are starting up another school year. Principal Michelle Burke says they may not be excited about cracking the books, but they're glad to be back on campus, their campus.
Our community is very resilient, so I think it through the whole ordeal, I think we knew that we would be okay.
After taking classes at Central Middle School for a semester and a half, they returned to their own campus in March. Temporary buildings are still prevalent.
I would say that's the one obstacle that we have, is that we have some teachers who float, and we really don't even consider it an obstacle. We're so happy to be back.
State Superintendent John White says the flood doesn't seem to have slowed Louisiana students down.
You know, we sustained our progress on LEAP. We have sustained our progress on graduation. We have higher ACT and advanced placement results this year. So I wouldn't say that in any general sense it's had a depressing effect on results.
The LEAP test is given on an annual basis to students in 3rd through 8th grades. Across the state in English, math, and science, those scores were largely unchanged year over year. In the 3 parishes most affected by the flood, Ascension, East Baton Rouge, and Livingston, English scores were up. Math fell in EBR and Livingston, and science held steady.
That said, you never know. I mean, about individual circumstances, and so we're taking a look at some of those cases. You know, some of those cases where kids literally were out of their school building the whole year. They were platooning and going to school into the evening or very early in the morning, or teachers weren't able to get back into their homes.
White says it's the work of local districts that's been instrumental in getting schools back up and running.
While things should move faster, I'm happy to say that we have a lot of renovated school buildings now in Louisiana that we didn't have a year ago and that we had to have in light of the flooding. And that's a great testament to the local leadership, and we played a very, very small role in helping to coordinate that.
Other challenges state schools are facing include funding issues. In some of the last several years, lawmakers have made the decision not to increase the amount of money it gives schools per student.
It's having an effect, I mean, no question about it, and I think it's having mostly an effect on teacher salaries. And teacher salaries have never been exorbitant. On the other hand, we've always been able, when we do increase, to try to keep pace with inflation, keep pace with the gains that other professions are making, especially other professions that require a college degree. And we've seen that stop.
Student achievement nonetheless made news on Wednesday when results from last year's college readiness exams, ACT tests, were released.
When you raise expectations and you hold them high over a period of time, kids will rise to them. Teachers will help kids achieve them. We have more than 8,000 more students today who get a TOPS qualifying ACT score than did in 2012. But we still have real gaps. We are still not yet performing at the national average, although we're creeping ever closer.
But the department isn't just raising the bar higher in hopes that students will meet it. They're implementing tactics to improve performance.
And prepare every kid for kindergarten through a good child care or pre-K. Make sure when they get there they've got really strong curriculum and the teachers are prepared to actually teach that curriculum. Third, make sure when they graduate from high school that they're doing things that are interesting to them, that they're qualified for the next step of education. And fifth, when things are going off the rails, intervene.
Louisiana has gotten high marks on its plan to meet the standards of the Every Student Succeeds Act. That's a new federal regulation that replaced No Child Left Behind. It will enhance classrooms, White says.
You're going to see new science standards, for example, and a new science curriculum that actually challenges kids to write and to think more than just bubble tests. You're going to see supports for students with disabilities and for students with English language needs who maybe don't speak English as their original language at home. You're going to see an expansion of arts, music, and health.
It all boils down to keeping standards high.
The good thing in Louisiana is, one, every indicator is pointing up, and second, our expectations are still high, so there's a long way to go. You should want there to be a long way to go, and we're therefore moving in the right direction.
There are two more initiatives that Superintendent White is excited to roll out this year. First, some high school students will have the opportunity to take a pre-engineering curriculum designed by LSU. In addition, there's a new program to get college students who want to be teachers learning from veteran educators in the classroom. Andre, back to you.
All right, Kelly, that's all fascinating stuff. Thank you for that. And that is our show for this week. Remember, you can watch LPB on demand on your phone or tablet with our LPB Anywhere app. The download is free from your app store. You can catch LPB news and public affairs shows as well as other Louisiana programs that you've come to enjoy over the years. And be sure to please like us on Facebook as well. For everyone at Louisiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Andre Morrow. Thanks for watching. Until next time, that's the state we're in.
Check us out on Facebook and Twitter, and visit lpb.org, where you can view more stories and leave us a comment. This program is available on DVD. Support provided by the Fred B. and Ruth B. Ziegler Foundation and the Ziegler Art Museum. Located in Jennings City Hall, the museum focuses on emerging Louisiana artists and is a historical and cultural center for Southwest Louisiana. Additional support provided by the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting and viewers like you.